Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gautama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you guys. Welcome to all of you guys. So we're going to start our morning with loving kindness meditation. And I think a lot of you guys have maybe studied this before with me, but if not, there's classes where I teach loving kindness meditation and it's been recorded. So it's helpful for you to be able to see that all the way through, because I help you with the words of the Buddha, helping you to understand why you're meditating, how to do it, and all these kinds of things. But today what I'm going to do is just give you just a little bit of refresher and maybe just kind of a couple of pointers for those of you guys that haven't studied that yet before we actually do the loving kindness meditation. So what I do is I start with chanting, just like I do with most meditations or all meditations, and then I move into some breathing mindfulness meditation. I'll guide you in that just for a brief period, and there'll be kind of like a 3-minute, 5-minute kind of quiet period where we're just meditating using breathing mindfulness meditation. Then we're going to go into loving kindness meditation, where you hear me guiding you there as well. I'll be doing affirmations, which you're going to need to repeat in the mind, where you say, "May I be peaceful." And you do this on the out breath. And then when we breathe in, and on the next one you say, "May I be safe." And then, "May I be well, may I be free of all discontentedness." And we'll make these wider and wider and wider rings. Here, this is just for visual aid. We're actually going to do probably about 6, maybe 7 different rings, and we'll eventually get to all beings. And then from there, after that, we'll go back to breathing mindfulness meditation, and then we'll come out with chanting. So it's kind of like a loving kindness sandwich with loving kindness in the middle, and then even the lettuce and tomato is like the breathing mindfulness meditation, and then the bread holding it together is the chanting. So this is how we do loving kindness meditation, but you're going to need to understand why, because what this is doing is transforming your mind away from anger, hatred, ill will, and all those lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyance. Even if you have negative self-talk in your mind, like diminishing and degrading inner dialogue, this will help you to be more loving and kind to this being who you are. So that's why we're starting with I. Even though we know there's no I here, we're using this language just to represent this being who we are. And then we're ultimately getting to all beings, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you have loving kindness for all beings. What loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, active goodwill. If you have any kind of hostility or frustration or irritation for any being whatsoever, the mind is not yet enlightened. You're going to still have those painful feelings. You're having conditional feelings. Even if you'll never see these beings ever, they could have died and be long in your past, or maybe you're never even going to see that person again. They're long in the past. If you're holding on to any kind of anger or resentment towards them, it's only hindering you from making progress on the path. Sometimes we feel like holding on to a grudge is getting back at that other person, but in reality, it's just harming your own mind. It's kind of like trying to burn somebody by holding on to a hot coal. You're holding on to this hot coal trying to burn somebody, when in reality, you're the only one that's getting burned. So this loving kindness meditation will uproot and eliminate the anger, hatred, ill will, but all those lesser versions too, like the frustration, irritation, annoyance. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't even have the slightest dislike for another person, where right now there might be people you like and certain people you dislike. And this is just based on craving being in the mind. So that's why breathing mindfulness meditation is so important. But then you need to bring in the loving kindness meditation to break up the ill will in the mind, almost like a jackhammering it away. So we're going to do this morning. And then afterwards, I'm going to move into discussing understanding and experiencing the jhanas. We're going to be talking about the jhanas in detail and helping you learn all about those. And then we'll take a break somewhere in there. And then when we come back from break, I'm going to be teaching you the 4 stages of enlightenment and helping you understand how the mind moves through these 4 stages of enlightenment and what you experience experience as the mind's moving through them. And then this afternoon, we'll be discussing the 10 fetters and helping you understand each one of those fetters and how to eradicate them from the mind. So this is probably going to be one of the most in-depth talks you've had about the fetters, understanding that in August, that retreat that I teach is the most in-depth with the fetters that I teach, because we spend an entire class period on each individual fetter. But here, this might be the first time that you've talked in detail about the Jhānas, the 4 stages of enlightenment, and the 10 fetters, because this is what you need to start understanding as you're putting together the Eightfold Path and you're starting to experience the Jhānas. You're going to need to know that you're experiencing them, because this is an indication for you that you're putting things together really well. And now you need to start focusing on eliminating the fetters to move the mind into enlightenment. So if you'd like to join for meditation, as you guys know, the chants are over there on the table. Welcome to all of you guys that are online joining us as well. I'm going to start with the chanting and then move into breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, back to breathing mindfulness, and then come out with the chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Bhutang Mahakavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Then I'll be back with guidance on loving kindness meditation. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these affirmations in the mind on the out breath. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May Mom and Dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May my family, friends, neighbors, and co-workers all be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who have harmed me be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. Now return back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Welcome to everyone here at the temple. Welcome to everyone online as well. This was loving kindness meditation. This is a practice that you're going to need to build up as you make your way to the jhanas and into the stages of enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without developing this meditation, because you wouldn't have the ability to break up the ill will that's in the mind. It's important to understand that this meditation isn't designed to send metta or send loving kindness to other people. You're not trying to change other people through your meditation. You're transforming your own mind. And it's important to always remember that anything that you're doing on the path is to transform your own mind, that in order for other people to improve, they need to choose to learn and grow and develop. So this meditation isn't to change other people. It's not possible for you to change other people through your meditation, because they need to do the work on their own mind in order to experience improvements and changes. So this meditation is rewiring your mind to be more loving and kind. And oftentimes doing this in the morning as your morning meditation, if you're building up to 2 or 3 per day, your morning meditation is really helpful to be loving kindness meditation in the way that we just did it, so that way you can go out into the world and be more loving and kind through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. Doesn't mean you can't do loving kindness meditation at any other time during the day, because you surely can. In the midday and the evening, you can do loving kindness meditation. It's going to help you eliminate your anger, your ill will, your frustration, agitation, that negative self-talk in the mind, and setting up your day that way to go out in the world and be more loving and kind. That means that now you're going to be producing more wholesome dhamma. Whereas if you didn't have the loving kindness in your mind and you went out in the day, if you were bitter or harsh or hostile, this is producing unwholesome dhamma, more unwholesome dhamma that you have to extinguish and that you need to be able to deal with. So if you're able to kind of fill up your gas tank, so to speak, in the morning, go out into your day with loving kindness, and then practice through your intentions, speech, and actions, being loving and kind, this will significantly reduce and eliminate your unwholesome dhamma production, because now your speech and your actions are emanating from this loving kindness. So that's why it's wise to do this one in the morning. But if you're going through a period of time where you're having a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of diminishing inner dialogue, you might be doing this 2 or 3 times a day, the loving kindness meditation. You can do this, each session, the 2 or 3 sessions per day. You can do it for weeks, just doing loving kindness meditation. And this will help you to transform your mind, gradually moving it closer and closer to that loving kindness. So you're going to need this one. And if you develop it and you would like to have questions or get help on this, let me know, because this is what's going to transform your mind and move it towards this loving kindness so that you can be practicing it in day-to-day life. So do you guys have any questions on loving kindness meditation? Remember, for those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, looks like Rachel has some questions. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good morning, David. For the text of the loving kindness meditation, do we say it verbally or do we say it silently?
If I was you, I would do it quietly within your own mind. That's how you can really transform it. You can really focus and be looking inward. And remember that you guys are going to need to customize this for your own purposes, right? There's certain people in your life that you have potentially anger or frustration or agitation towards. You're going to need to include them in your meditation. So you're doing this quietly inside your mind, and you're customizing these affirmations for your specific needs. So when I'm guiding you guys, I'm using these very general ones that apply to all of us, like may mom and dad, may my family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, those kinds of things. But you would like to, if you have a friend or if you have a ex-boyfriend or girlfriend that your mind's still holding on to anger towards, may Bob be peaceful, right? You're going to need to do that. Or if you have a sister or brother, you're going to need to include those individuals. So usually what you do is 2 rings or so, you do people that you already have loving kindness for, because that helps you to kind of bubble it up in the mind. And then you do kind of a ring or 2 of people you're more neutral about, maybe neighbors or coworkers, including their actual names if you need to. And then you go to people who you do have anger and hatred towards. You might do 2 or 3 rings of those. So 6 to 8 rings is usually what the mind can manage in any one particular meditation session. And then doing it this way, where you're kind of starting with a few that you have loving kindness for, moving to people you're more neutral about, and then moving to people that you do have anger and hatred towards. And this meditation is going to be customized as you go. You might have certain people in your meditation for a few weeks or a few months, and then as your mind's cultivated loving kindness for them, you might move them out of your meditation and move other people into your meditation. So this is a customizable meditation based on your specific needs, and you're going to be doing these affirmations inside the mind quietly. You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. Okay, so what I'm going to do is move forward in our class today, where I'm going to be sharing with you understanding and experiencing the jhanas. I refer to this as the light bulb is flickering, because what you're starting to get here in the jhanas is you're starting to get glimpses of enlightenment. Because on your way to enlightenment, it's not like it's a light switch where your mind goes from being unenlightened to wham, you're enlightened. Instead, the qualities of enlightenment start shining through more and more. If you think about like the sun, and you have the clouds in front of it, but the rays of the sun are kind of peering through the clouds. And as you pull the clouds back more and more and more, the rays of the sun start shining through. This is what's occurring when your mind's moving through the jhanas in the 4 stages of enlightenment, that you start seeing the qualities of the enlightened mind starting to shine through. And the jhanas is the first real big indication in your first experience where you start noticing this in a big way. You can notice some of the qualities of enlightenment shining through even before you get to the jhanas. But once you're in the jhanas, this is where you really start seeing it. It's very significant. Being off the path to enlightenment, or even on the path to enlightenment, pales in comparison to what you start experiencing as your mind moves through the jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment. It's like night and day. It's very clear to you that your mind is now moving into the jhanas, because you start seeing these qualities starting to peer through more and more. So I'm going to explain to you what the jhanas are. I'm also going to explain to you what the jhanas aren't. And then we're going to use the words of the Buddha so you can see what he talked about with these jhanas. And then I'm going to break it down for you and explain to you what you're going to experience in each one of these jhanas, so that you'll know what to experience and that your mind is in these jhanas. I'm even going to be talking about some of the dangers with the jhanas, because there are certain dangers that you need to be looking out for as your mind's moving into the jhanas. And we're going to be talking about the benefits of the jhanas as well. So as we go, feel free to ask any and all questions, just like I always open up to you guys. And if you guys could use the mics here at the temple, and then for those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So first, let's talk about what the jhanas are. This word jhana is a Pali word, and if it translated to just one English word, I would just use that word because it would be so much easier for all of us. These are the 2 words that I still use that are Pali, which is Gama and Jhana. And it's because they don't translate to just one English word. So I still need to use them in the Pali language. What Jhana is meditative or mental absorption, where the mind has absorbed a certain amount of meditation, it's absorbed a certain amount of the teachings, and the mind is now practicing to a certain degree. So the mind has absorbed it. It absorbed meditation, and the mind has absorbed a certain amount of mental understanding of the teachings, and you're starting to practice the teachings to a certain degree. It refers to these deep states of subtle concentration where the mind is calm and relaxed, but yet alert and attentive. Oftentimes when we think about a relaxed and calm mind, we think about kind of dullness or lethargic condition, but this isn't what the enlightened mind experiences. The enlightened mind experiences relaxed and calm state, but it's attentive and alert. The mind is attentive and you're mindful and you're aware. The light bulb is flickering here. You're getting these glimpses of enlightenment where the mind is not yet enlightened, but you're experiencing these temporary periods where you're starting to see these heightened qualities of mind. And these aren't being produced by any particular condition, so you can't cut it off and you can't let it go. You might notice this joy springing up in the mind, or this calmness or this peacefulness springing up in the mind. And up to that point, you've been taught to cut things off and cut things off and cut it off and let it go, because that's what you're doing, is cutting off the conditioned pleasant feelings. And you might be trying to constantly cut off this peacefulness and this joy, but it just won't go away because there's nothing to cut off, because it's unconditioned. You can't eliminate it. This is why it's impossible for an enlightened mind to experience any anger and sadness, because there's no conditions left that are producing those things. They've all been eradicated. So when you start getting these glimpses of improved qualities of mind in the jhanas, your natural instinct might be to try to cut it off and let it go. And that's wise. You should always try to do that. If there's a conditioned feeling in your mind, whether it's pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, cut off the condition that's causing that. But be aware that as you're doing this and you're starting to experience the qualities of the jhanas, you're not going to be able to cut it off because there's no condition that's producing it, and it's just going to be permeating in the mind. It's just on. But when you're starting to move into the jhanas, those mental qualities, they are impermanent at that point, because your mind still has craving, anger, and ignorance there. So you'll experience this peace and joy for a period of time, but then it'll be gone because the mind's going to experience discontentedness again. So it's either like the light bulb's on or the light bulb's off. This is like the flickering of the light bulb, where discontentedness arises, changes, and fades away. These qualities that you're going to start experiencing in the jhanas, they don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. They're either going to be on or off. And this is because the mind still has craving, desire, attachment. So these mental qualities are not yet permanent, but they will become more and more elongated as you're starting to get more and more of the pollution out of the mind. These are 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. They're produced by practicing the Eightfold Path. Sometimes people think that the jhanas are only experienced in meditation, but you can't meditate your way to the jhanas. It's not possible. You would need to have a certain amount of improvement to your moral conduct and your mental discipline, not only in meditation, but outside of meditation too. So if you were, say, not practicing the 5 precepts, for example, if you weren't practicing those closely, you're not going to be able to experience the jhanas. So if you're killing or stealing or having sexual misconduct or lying or taking substances that cause heedlessness, you're not going to be able to experience these jhanas. So it's the Eightfold Path and all the connected teachings that are helping to remove the pollution out of the mind, that the qualities of the jhanas start shining through. So it's the Eightfold Path, the entire Eightfold Path, which includes meditation, that's going to start producing these qualities of the jhanas. You'll see in different places where people reference more than just 4 jhanas. You might hear people talk about 8 jhanas or 6 jhanas or any number of different jhanas out there. But when you look at the original words of the Buddha, he only taught 4 jhanas. And you'll be able to, as your mind goes through these jhanas, be able to independently confirm that yes, there is 4 jhanas. So while you'll see people out there talking about all these different numbers of jhanas, this is just from not understanding the original teachings of the Buddha. It's the impermanent nature of how the teachings are being shared in the world. And understand that I'm going to share with you the original words of the Buddha where he's talking about these 4 jhanas, and you'll know that he did indeed teach 4 jhanas, and then you'll be able to independently confirm it as your mind's moving through these jhanas. But you'll see other people talking about other numbers of jhanas, and this is just misunderstanding. And the Buddha shared that when you encounter teachings that are opposite of what he taught, even if it's coming from a monk or a well-respected teacher or somebody that you know pretty well. He says if it conflicts with what he taught, you should ignore that teaching and consider that that person has misunderstood his teachings. So when you compare what other people are teaching to his original words and it conflicts with that, he says you should ignore that and consider that that person has misunderstood his teachings. So that's why it's so important that you go back to the original source teachings and see his original words on all these topics, not just the jhanas. So I'm going to share those with you here as we get going. The jhanas are an indication for you that you're putting together the Eightfold Path. This is the light bulb flickering. It's confirmation for you that you're practicing right view to a certain extent, that you're practicing right intention to a certain extent, you're practicing right speech, right action, right livelihood, you're practicing right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. You haven't perfected it yet, but you're practicing it to a certain degree that your mind is starting to experience these improved qualities. You wouldn't be experiencing these improved qualities of mind if you hadn't put together the Eightfold Path to a certain degree. So this is an indication for you that things are going fairly well, but it's not a time to get excited and elated and, wow, look at me, get boastful or arrogant or conceited or anything like that. It's just a personal indication for you that, yes, your mind is headed in the right direction because you're putting together the Eightfold Path well. And this will help you to then start pivoting and start focusing on the 10 fetters, because at that point, you're going to need to start focusing on the 10 fetters more closely. All the Eightfold Path and all the teachings that the Buddha shared is helping you to eliminate the 10 fetters, which we're going to be talking about this morning with the 4 stages of enlightenment. And this afternoon, we're going to talk about the 10 fetters in a lot more detail. But everything he taught you is to eliminate these 10 fetters. So in one way or the other, it's helping you to eliminate those, even the 5 precepts. So you've been eliminating the 10 fetters, and that's why the mind is moving into the jhanas. But at this point, prior to the jhanas, you don't necessarily know exactly which fetters you're eliminating. You're just putting together the Eightfold Path and your meditation practice and the 5 precepts. And at this point, your mind's starting to experience these improved qualities. And this is the time that you now start really honing in and start looking at the fetters really closely and start to consciously work to eliminate each individual fetter. And that's why this particular course, we start focusing on the fetters and helping you to understand what those are and how to eliminate them. Every practitioner will experience the jhanas on the way to the first stage of enlightenment. It's not possible to get to the first stage of enlightenment without moving through the jhanas. So you will move through those and experience them, and you'll be able to track that your mind's actually moving through those jhanas. You wouldn't be able to progress to enlightenment without actually experiencing the jhanas. So let's talk more about what the jhanas are. The jhanas are temporary. They're not meant for the mind to dwell in these jhanas. Sometimes the qualities of the jhanas are so enjoyable that people can sometimes get bogged down in the jhanas. But when you're starting to experience these enjoyable qualities of mind, it's important that you understand that you shouldn't try to dwell in these or cling to these qualities that the mind is experiencing. The mind can regress out of the jhanas. If you don't stay determined, dedicated, and diligent, your mind can regress backwards. So you can start experiencing these qualities of the jhanas, these heightened qualities. And then if you become complacent and you're not actually actively working to continue to improve your practice, your mind will backslide. It'll regress out of them. And then oftentimes what people experience once their mind regresses is that experience in the jhanas was so enjoyable, they start craving them again. And they start craving and craving and craving and wanting to be in the jhanas. And that craving to be in the jhanas actually hinders them from actually getting back into the jhanas. So you can start to experience these qualities. You start seeing the light bulb flickering, and your mind can actually regress out of it if you become complacent. So whatever you were doing that got you to the jhanas, just keep doing those things, which is the Eightfold Path, which is your meditation practice, which is all those things. And then that's where you start focusing on the 10 fetters so that you can move through the jhanas. Those qualities of the jhanas are going to stay with you all the way through to enlightenment. There are certain qualities that you're going to see me talk about, that these qualities actually stay in the mind as you're making your way through the jhanas and through the 4 stages of enlightenment, these qualities that you start experiencing. So these improved qualities of mind that you experience are experienced at all times during your day. even in meditation, even outside of meditation, those qualities are going to stay with you all the way through to the 4 stages of enlightenment. But it's important not to cling to them and crave them and long and yearn for them, because they're going to be flickering for a while. You'll experience them for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, even a few weeks, and then they'll kind of go away. This is the light bulb flickering. They're not going to gradually go away. It's just that, boom, they're either on or they're off. And if you're craving those qualities, your mind's going to be still longing and yearning. And you got to get rid of those cravings so that then you can elongate the amount of time that the mind is experiencing these jhanas. These jhanas are oftentimes mistaken for enlightenment because of the improved qualities, and it is like night and day that your mind is moving from just being on the path to enlightenment or off the path to enlightenment to experiencing these qualities of the mind that oftentimes people mistake, and they think that they're actually enlightened when they're experiencing the qualities of the jhanas because they're that enjoyable and they're that heightened as compared to what you were experiencing when you were off the path to enlightenment or even when you first got on the path to enlightenment. So oftentimes people are experiencing the jhanas and they think that their mind is actually enlightened. And this is where you can hear that people will sometimes explain enlightenment as ultimate bliss, or they will explain enlightenment as an enlightened being still experiences sadness, anger, frustration, and these other discontent feelings, because they're actually experiencing the jhanas, which are these heightened qualities, but your mind's not yet enlightened. You're still experiencing discontentedness to a certain degree in the jhanas. So because the experience in the jhanas is like night and day, that it's very heightened compared to what you were once experiencing, oftentimes people think that they're enlightened when they're really not. And they start explaining what they're experiencing as enlightenment. And this is why sometimes people will say enlightened beings still get sad or frustrated or irritated or annoyed, when this isn't actually true. And this is just because the person isn't understanding that they're in the jhanas and they haven't yet gotten to enlightenment. So whatever you're experiencing in the jhanas, as much as that's going to be really amazing for you, it gets so much better from that point forward. But if you get bogged down in the jhanas and think that you're enlightened and you become complacent, your mind's going to regress out of that and you're not going to be able to continue forward and getting to even better qualities of mind when you move through the 4 stages of enlightenment. So it's important to know that you're in the jhanas so that you know you're not enlightened yet, the mind is not yet enlightened, and that there's still a whole lot of work to do. By the time you get to the jhanas, it's kind of like this is where the real work begins. You've done a lot of work in order to get to the jhanas by putting together the Eightfold Path, which includes your meditation practice. But once you get to the jhanas, this is where a lot of the real work begins, because now you got to eliminate those 10 fetters and you got to really deeply understand what those are. But you'll have this foundation or this solid framework of teachings that you've been developing to this point that is going to help you to be able to work to eliminate those 10 fetters. You wouldn't be able to just go in and eliminate the 10 fetters by themselves without this foundational practice of the Eightfold Path. So that's why early on, it's important to focus on developing your Eightfold Path. So they're often mistaken, these jhanas are often mistaken as enlightenment itself. So let's talk about what the jhanas are not. They're not something to be boastful about or conceited about or going around and bragging about, right? This isn't something you're going to put on your Facebook page where it's like, hey, I've got to the first jhana. Aren't you so proud of me? You know, you're not going to call up mom and dad and be like, hey, mom, guess what? I'm in the second jhana. Isn't that amazing? Aren't you so proud of me? Right? This isn't what you're interested in using these for. These are like personal guidance. It's like a personal plan to be able to help you. It's almost like a map or a GPS giving you an indication that you're making your way towards the goal. So it's helping you to plot your steps forward. So if you can see that you're in the first or second or third or fourth jhana, it's helping you to be able to continue your forward progress. It's personal growth, personal development, personal guidance, but it's not something to go out and be boastful about. You might talk about this with your teacher and say, hey, I think I'm in the first jhana, or I think I'm in the third jhana, or whatever. And your teacher can help you to figure that out, but it's not something you'll probably talk with anybody else about, not even any other member of the community here or your friends or your family or anything like this. If people ask you what the jhanas are, you would be able to explain them at that point, but that's because someone's asked you about them. But you're not going to just go out and initiate a conversation and start bragging or being boastful about being in the jhanas, because if you're doing that, it's hindering you from enlightenment, because one of the fetters is conceit and the ego that you need to eliminate. So being boastful and arrogant about being in the jhanas is walking in the opposite direction of continued progress on the path. The jhanas are not something that's only experienced in meditation. This is one of the big misunderstandings in the world, that people actually refer to certain meditation. They call it jhana meditation, where they think that because they're in meditation and they're experiencing a certain amount of peacefulness, that they have now entered a certain jhana. And some people think that they can selectively go into the second or third or fourth jhana and then selectively exit out of that jhana. But that's not actually true. If you're experiencing the jhanas, the mind's going to be residing in these mental qualities. You'll see the words of the Buddha where he talks about this. He talks about residing in the jhana. So it's not just meditation that's going to produce these jhanas. It's not just meditation where you experience the qualities of the jhanas. So it's all during your day that you're going to be experiencing these. And you can't selectively move in and out of these jhanas. If your mind is in the second jhana, it's in the second jhana, and that's where it's going to reside. And then if you're moving to the third jhana, it will be in the third jhana. The mind can regress backwards if you become complacent, but you're not kind of like on your beck and call. It's not like you're pressing a button and entering into the second jhana or third jhana. The mind is gradually moving into these jhanas and through the jhanas and into the first stage of enlightenment. The jhanas aren't something to crave or desire or become obsessed with. Sometimes people get so obsessed with trying to figure out if they're in the first or second jhana. Are they in the third or the fourth jhana? Are they in the second or the third jhana? They get so obsessed about tracking every little detail of what's going on in the mind. You need to pay attention to that to a certain degree, just so that you can confirm the four jhanas and that they are true, and you can see the qualities of the mind moving through these. But if you become obsessed with what individual jhana that you're in, this is the mind craving and desiring, and it's going to hinder you from being able to continue to progress. So because these jhanas are temporary and your mind's not meant to dwell there, you would like to just kind of move right on through them, right? It's just kind of like moving through a store, moving from one store to the next, to the next, to the next, and you're ultimately trying to get to the carnival, right? You're ultimately trying to get to that place. So you would like to just kind of like move through these jhanas, and it's going to be multiple months and maybe even a year or two as you're moving through the jhanas. But as you're making your way through it, don't get obsessed about each individual jhana and what you're experiencing in each individual jhana. Just learn it enough to be able to confirm that what the Buddha is teaching you is true, and then just continue to make forward progress from that point forward. The jhanas are not enlightenment, as we were explaining before. The mind still is experiencing discontentedness in the jhanas, so you need to continue to stay focused on developing your life practice on the path to enlightenment. The same things that got you to the jhanas are the same things that are going to get you out of the jhanas. And it's not that there's anything bad with the jhanas and you need to get out of them. It's just that you're accumulating more and more qualities as your mind's moving through the jhanas, and you would like to get to the first and second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment. So you'd like to just keep on moving through the jhanas. So it's not enlightenment itself. The jhanas also aren't a mystical or magical experience that, you need to talk about this foo-foo stuff like, wow, let me tell you what's happened to me. Oh my goodness, this is like so amazing. Let me just tell you everything about this. So it's not any kind of mystical or magical thing. It's not to determine whether you're a special person or not. This is all boastfulness, conceit, and arrogance that would be coming into the mind. Oftentimes when the mind's moving through the jhanas, conceit can arise. This is very common. I see it frequently because the mind and the qualities that you're experiencing, you had no idea that the mind can even experience these types of qualities. But remember, those pale in comparison to what you're experiencing by the time you get to the enlightened mental state. So if you get conceited and boastful and puffed up when you're in the jhanas, it's going to hinder you from being able to continue to go forward. So as you're experiencing these improved qualities of mind, be sure to remain humble. This is so important. Okay. Let's talk about the dangers of the jhanas. Due to this drastically improved qualities of mind, as I mentioned, the mind can become conceited, boastful, arrogant, and prideful. This is one of the dangers because you can get bogged down there. And you're creating unwholesome karma when you're going around being boastful and conceited and prideful, and you're talking to people in that way. It's going to produce unwholesome karma for you. So you need to pay attention to the ego and be working to eliminate the ego as your mind's moving through the jhanas. The mind can become complacent and start holding on to these qualities of the jhanas because it's so pleasurable in the jhanas. The mind can oftentimes get bogged down in them. So be aware of that the mind can become complacent. With complacency, the mind can regress out of the jhanas. So that's one of the dangers, is that because of the complacency, the mind can actually regress out of it. The mind can become overwhelmed with excitement and joy when the mind is in the jhanas. That's one of the dangers. And it can be a challenge to restrain the mind because you get so excited. And this is why people describe the jhanas as ultimate bliss, that the mind can become unrestrained. It's almost like if you remember that toy where you have the snakes in the can and you pop up in the top and they just bounce out of the can. That's almost kind of what the mind does when it's experiencing the jhanas in some cases. So you need to be able to restrain the mind as the mind's moving through the jhanas. It can become overexcited with this ultimate bliss. You can also experience these swings where the mind goes from this gladness and this excitement that I'm talking about, and it can swing over to this sadness, this boredom, this loneliness. And you can notice these drastic swings sometimes with the mind. So if you're noticing that, this is an indication that you're in the jhanas, but you need to continue to practice to gain mental discipline with your meditation. And then outside of meditation too, you need to be continuing to practice your singleness of mind so that you can start controlling the mind better, because it's going to start swinging back and forth from gladness to sadness. And as you're swinging like this pendulum, you need to be able to bring the mind to the middle. And it's the 7 factors of enlightenment that are going to help you to be able to do that. Practicing the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity. Those are from the 7 factors of enlightenment that you would have learned in other classes that I've taught. But if you guys would like to review those, we can. That's part of the 7 factors of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment aren't to determine whether you are or aren't enlightened. They're tools to fine-tune the mind. And this is where you're going to start needing those more and more readily, is when the mind's moving through these jhanas. You're going to need to bring in the tranquility, the calmness, and the concentration, the equanimity, because the mind's going to tend to go in this excited state, but then it might go to this dull and lethargic state where the mind's complacent too. And you might need to arise the enlightenment factor of investigation, energy, and joy, which will bring the mind out of the sluggish state. There can be significant amounts of energy that are experienced in the jhanas, these surges where the mind is kind of having these energy surges. It can be sudden. And again, the mind is not 100% restrained here. There's not a whole lot of mental discipline. The mind's starting to become unraveled a little bit. So this is one of the dangers. So you just need to be aware of it. It's not that you need to worry about it. It's not that you need to have any stress or anxiety about it, but just know that these things can occur. And the Buddha is giving you the tools and the techniques of how to address this so that when this is occurring, you're gaining more and more control over the mind. This is how you're getting more and more discipline of the mind, because as the mind starts unraveling a little bit, you're bringing in the tools and techniques that you need to be able to restrain it and have more discipline. So these are some of the dangers of the jhanas. Some of the benefits of the jhanas is, as I mentioned, it's an indication that you're moving in the right direction. It's helping you to know, like, hey, I'm putting together the Eightfold Path pretty well here, because you wouldn't be able to experience the jhanas without having put together the Eightfold Path. So it's an indication for you that you're headed in the right direction. These improved qualities of mind that you're experiencing, these are needed in order to experience further progress on the path to enlightenment. So for example, in the second jhana, you experience what's called unification of the mind, or oneness of mind, where prior to the second jhana, you have a conscious mind and you have a subconscious mind. And your conscious mind is polluted, but your subconscious mind is even more polluted. But by the time you get to the second jhana, you now have oneness of mind, or you have this unification of the mind where you can observe the entire mind. You have awareness or mindfulness of the entire mind. And you need that in order to purify the mind and actually get to enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to make continued progress moving through the jhanas and getting to enlightenment itself if the mind just had a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. Because if you don't have access to the subconscious mind, it's polluted and you can't actually purify it. So by the time you get to the second jhana, there's been this unification or this oneness of mind where you now have full awareness of the entire mind. So you need that in order to make further progress. So the benefits that you're starting to experience, not just this one, but other ones that you hear me talk about when we discuss what the jhanas are, you're going to need those qualities in order to make further progress. So that's one of the benefits of the jhanas, is that it's helping you to experience the qualities that you need that continue to propel you and help you progress further on the path to enlightenment. As I mentioned here, the subconscious mind has been eliminated and one has full awareness. You fully developed right concentration and right mindfulness at this point by the time your mind's moving through the jhanas. And you need those qualities in order to make further progress on the path. By the time you've gotten to the jhanas, you've cultivated deep wisdom that has led to producing those jhanas. And now, with continued growth and development towards the attainment of enlightenment, you'll be able to use that wisdom to help you. Some people refer to this as the opening of the third eye, or the inner eye, or the divine eye. Some people refer to it that way. This is like introspection and being reflective, that by the time you've moved into the jhanas, you're going to start noticing that you have this introspection and reflection that wasn't there before, that you can look inward and you can start to uncover what's going on within your own mind, and you can start accessing your wisdom of these natural laws more readily and apply it in particular situations. So this cultivation of deep wisdom and this ability to look inward and be introspective is going to help you to be able to look at any particular situation that you're encountering and then make wise decisions to continue to progress forward in your life and cultivate more and more wholesome dhamma. That's one of the benefits of being in the jhanas. There's certain wisdom that you have on board as your mind's moving through the jhanas that you didn't have before. You have certain wisdom of wholesome and unwholesome things, wise and unwise things. And this is going to help you in your decision making. This is going to help you in terms of if you're looking to have a life partner, if you're interested in having friends, or if you're getting a new job, or where you might choose to live, a place where you might choose to associate or spend time at. You're going to have more wisdom about how to discern whether this is a wise place for me to associate with, or a wise person for me to associate with, or a certain place to live. Would it be wise for me to live here? Would it be wise for me to patronize this business? You'll have that wisdom on board that you didn't have before. And this is going to help you to cultivate more and more wholesome dhamma and eliminate the unwholesome dhamma. So there's going to be improved decision making when your mind's moving through the jhanas because you have more access to your wisdom. Some more benefits is discontentedness is significantly reduced. It's not eliminated, but it's significantly reduced by the time you get to the jhanas. There's this calmness and composure that is readily and easily accessible to you, readily practiced. The equanimity of the mind is really starting to come through in the jhanas. So in situations where you would normally have been shaken up, you're going to notice that you're more calm and more focused and more composed. And it's going to seem a little bit strange to you because you're used to being so shaken up in those situations. So for example, if you've experienced the death of a loved one in the past and your mind was sorrowful and grieving, now as your mind's moving through the jhanas and you get that news, you might be perfectly calm. Or maybe if your mother, your father, your brothers and sisters went to the hospital before, like maybe in an accident, and your mind was all shaken up by that, now if that same thing occurs again, you're going to be quite calm, and it's going to seem odd to you, especially if you associate being shaken up with love, because it's not the love that's actually causing the mind to be shaken up. It's the craving, desire, attachment. So now when you're more calm, it's going to seem very strange and very odd because the people around you might be all shaken up and kind of hysterical where you're quite calm, right? And people can even look to you and say, you don't care about mom. You're not even upset. You're not even crying. No, I care about mom. I love dad. I'm just not attached to them. And I'm not craving for them to be permanently healthy. I understand that they're going to have a sickness at some time. So you might even have people blaming you and saying that you don't care and that you don't love people. But you'll know the truth that no, it's just that my mind's calm because I'm not attached. And you're able to maintain your calmness and composure. So it'll seem a little bit odd for you in situations, but this is your mind getting used to moving into these jhanas and moving into the 4 stages of enlightenment. There can be more awareness of the interconnected nature of beings in the world, where you can feel closer to all beings, including animals, where you can feel very close to others, where before you might have felt very distant from people and very distant from animals and living beings, and you didn't quite understand them, where now as your mind's moving through the jhanas, you can start feeling this interconnectivity, where you don't have as much attachment to people, but you understand this interconnectivity, that when I make a decision, it's going to affect somebody else, either in a wholesome way or an unwholesome way. And you start being much more conscious about the decisions that you're making because you see this interconnectivity of how your decisions can affect other people that are close to you. So you can not only experience this interconnectivity between beings, but you can start seeing the suffering of other beings very well. And this is where, it can be really dramatic in your own mind, is that you see people suffering and having so much misery and despair. And oftentimes they're blaming other people around them, and you know the truth. And this can be very challenging for you because you see other people suffering so much, but yet your mind is becoming more and more peaceful. And this can be really challenging for you. But this is one of the benefits of moving into the jhanas, is that you have this interconnectivity. You see this interconnectivity and you start becoming more conscious of your decisions and how those decisions are implemented in the world. Smiling becomes much easier when you move into the jhanas. There's this more cheerful disposition. It's very easy to access your smile, where in the past it might have been much more challenging for you to smile. You might have felt very droggy or very sad or sorrowful. It might have been a lot of displeasure, where now the mind is more uplifted. It's more bright. There's more positivity in your mind. So you're more cheerful. You have a more cheerful disposition. And other people around you might be jealous and envious of that. And they might even get mad at you for being so cheerful and so uplifted, right? But just understand that you haven't caused anybody harm by being cheerful and by having a cheerful disposition and by smiling, right? If other people are upset and envious and jealous of that and trying to pull you down, that's their craving, desire, attachment. Because when people see you moving out of the darkness and towards the light, they're going to try to pull you back down. Because that old saying of misery loves company is true. Misery loves company. When people are in the darkness, they like other people to be in the darkness with them, because somebody ascending higher and higher to a higher consciousness, it's a constant reminder for them that they're in the darkness and that they're not doing the work that they need to do to improve. So when somebody starts moving closer and closer to the light, typically the people around you who are attached to you will try to pull you down and keep you down in the darkness, because even though they might have a certain amount of love in their mind, they have a certain amount of craving and attachment, and they're not truly interested in doing the work themselves to get out of the darkness. So you getting to the light is a constant reminder for them that they're not doing all that they could do in order to improve their life. So as you start having this smiling and this cheerful disposition, don't be surprised if some people around you might get envious or jealous or even angry or hateful that you're experiencing that. But you don't have to stop feeling cheerful just because other people are angry, because you're not causing their anger. Continue to walk towards the light. And more, those people might even choose to come along, and they might choose to do the work too, because they see you becoming more and more peaceful. If you stay down in the darkness with them, it's just going to keep everybody in the darkness. So keep on moving forward. The more people are angry at you for being cheerful, just become more cheerful. Right? And then slowly but surely, they're going to have to eliminate their attachment and get to the point where they're peaceful themselves, because you're moving on. You're moving to this cheerful disposition, this brightened awareness, this radiance and brightness is starting to shine through. You haven't done anything wrong at that point. You'll notice that it's easier to develop relationships and wholesome friends by the time you get into the jhanas, because of that wisdom that you've cultivated, and because you're not being so bitter and harsh and hostile anymore. You're going to notice that it's much easier to make friends. You might have noticed at other times in your life that it was more challenging to make friends and have conversations and talk to that person that you don't know, or you're sitting at a bus stop and normally you're like really hesitant to talk to the person next to you. Where now, when your mind's moving through the jhanas, you're more open, you're more interested in talking with other people, and you more easily are able to have conversations with people you don't even know. And you might have that 5-minute conversation and just move on and not cling to this relationship. So you'll notice that your intention, speech, and actions, your livelihood is becoming more and more wholesome. So it's making it easier and easier for you to have friends. Not only you being able to have friends, but people being interested in being friends with you, because you're not harming other people. When we're out there being bitter and harsh and hostile, there's only so many people that would be willing to be around that. But when you're becoming more loving and kind and compassionate and warm and gentle, polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, you're going to have more and more people that are interested in spending time with you. So you might notice this, that people are more and more interested in spending time with you. The more you become enlightened, the more enlightened you become, the more that people are going to be interested in spending time with you. So if you've gone through a long period of time where maybe you haven't had a partner, you haven't had a boyfriend or girlfriend, as you become more and more enlightened, you might notice that people start taking a special interest in you, and people might start being interested in being with you as a partner. Now, that's not the goal of getting to enlightenment, but it's just something to be aware of, because if you're not interested in a partner, you might start getting all this attention from people as your mind's starting to move through the jhanas, and you're going to need to be aware of that, because you're going to have all these people that are maybe interested in engaging in a relationship with you. And if you're not interested in that, you're going to need to be very skillful in moving past that, right? But if you're interested in having a relationship, you're going to have lots of people to select from, because people are going to enjoy that cheerful disposition, that smiling nature, that brightness, that radiance that you have. And then if you'd like to have a relationship, have a relationship. But understand that any kind of sensual desire is going to keep you away from continued progress. You can get to the second stage of enlightenment and still have a sexual relationship. And you might choose to do that, particularly if you're young. You might choose to move all the way through the jhanas into the second stage of enlightenment, maintaining a sexual relationship. And then 10 years, 15 years, 20 years after you've had kids, you've been there, done that, you've had all the sex that you're interested in having, you might decide to move into the third and ultimately the fourth stage of enlightenment. But that's a decision for you to make. Some people, they get on the path to enlightenment and they just make their way to enlightenment. Some people, they might decide to have a partner, but just know that you can get bogged down in that sensual desire and stay aware of that. But sometimes people are consciously making the choice to stay in that second stage of enlightenment for a period of time, be it 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, do all the other work on the path to enlightenment. You'll be quite peaceful and quite joyful in that second stage of enlightenment. But every once in a while, you're going to be frustrated and agitated because you're going to want sex and you can't get it. And this is where the mind is still going to be discontent. But you can still do all the other work on the path to enlightenment while still hanging out in that second stage. So we'll talk about that after we talk about the jhanas, but just helping you to understand that you're going to have lots of friends coming around potentially as you become more and more awake, as you become more and more bright and radiant and cheerful. And some of these people may even be interested in having a sexual relationship with you and having you as a life partner, because you're becoming so cheerful, you're so wise, you're friendly, you're respectful, and people enjoy being around that kind of thing. That's the dhamma, the cause and effect, or the action and result. So let me see if you guys have any questions on anything we've been talking about so far, and then I'm going to move into sharing the words of the Buddha with you on the jhanas. So if you guys have questions, let me know on anything that we've discussed so far. Anything you'd like to talk about? Let me see online. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online either. Okay, so now let's look at the words of the Buddha on the jhanas. I'm going to read this to you, which I don't usually do in the other classes because we're not exploring this in detail, but this is the course to explore the jhanas. So I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to break it down for you and explain to you each one of these jhanas and what you're going to experience in each one of these jhanas. So this is the words of the Buddha about the jhanas and what you experience when you're moving through these jhanas. And you'll be able to independently confirm this as you're moving through the jhanas. He says, "In what, monks, is right concentration? Here, a monk distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. And with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters and resides in the second jhana, which is without thinking and pondering, based in concentration, filled with excitement and joy. And with the fading away of excitement, remaining imperturbable, which means unable to be upset or excited, the mind is calm and serene, mindful and clearly aware, he experiences in himself the joy of which the noble ones say, peaceful is he who resides with equanimity and mindfulness. He enters the third jhana. And having given up pleasure and pain, and with the fading away of former gladness and sadness, he enters and resides in the fourth jhana, which is beyond pleasure and pain, and purified by equanimity and mindfulness. This is called right concentration. So these are the words of the Buddha explaining the jhanas, okay? You can see this in the Pali Canon. You can see this in the book series that I share. He's helping you to understand what the jhanas are. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down for you like I do with his other teachings, taking out some of the connecting words so that you'll understand what it is that you're experiencing. So this is what you'll experience when you're in the first jhana. The mind is going to have been distanced from sense desires. What this means is that you've already seen very clearly by the time you've gotten to the first jhana that sensual pleasure or sensual longing, yearning, the desire, the craving, the attachment is causing discontentedness. You will have seen that, and you will have started to distance yourself from craving, desire, attachment, meaning that you're no longer holding on to the things that you once held on to. Right? This is what we mean distanced by sense desires, meaning you've distanced yourself from this craving, desire, attachment. You've eliminated a certain amount of your cravings, desires, attachments. You haven't eliminated the objects, right? You can have a computer, you can have a phone, you can have a boyfriend or girlfriend, you can have a car, you can have these things. The craving, desire, attachment isn't the object. It's inside the mind. It's the longing, yearning. So the mind has been distanced from these cravings, desires, attachments. You've distanced yourself from these things because you see the danger in allowing the mind to continue to crave because it just produces discontentedness. So the mind has distanced itself from them. Hasn't eliminated all your cravings. You're just starting to distance yourself from them. Distant from unwholesome mental states. There are certain unwholesome mental states that you're starting to distance yourself from. Maybe you've been judgmental towards people in the past and you're starting to distance yourself from that. Maybe you've been angry and hateful in certain situations. You're starting to distance yourself from that. Maybe you've been selfish to a certain degree. You're starting to distance yourself from this unwholesome quality of selfishness and other qualities like this. The mind is starting to distance itself from unwholesome mental states. You haven't eliminated them 100%. You're just starting to distance yourself from them. Then the Buddha shares with thinking and pondering. What this is when you enter into the first jhana, there's all this thinking and pondering. The mind almost might become obsessive about the teachings to a certain degree, where in the past, we didn't have the wisdom of the path to enlightenment. We're just plowing through the world, knocking down the trees, burning up the forest. We start smelling smoke and we're like, who lit the fire? Right? Because we've been walking through the forest, we haven't been aware. But now, by the time you get to the jhanas, your mind is aware of these natural laws, and you're starting to think and ponder about any particular situation that you have. You're starting to look at the teachings and think and ponder, like, how should I do that? How should I handle that? That person is choosing to do that. Maybe I should do it this way, or maybe I should do it that way. And you start thinking about things like right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. You start thinking about the 5 precepts. You start thinking about all the other training and trying to figure out what would be the best, most wise thing for me to do in this situation. What is going to produce the most wholesome results here? So you start thinking and pondering about this. And this is where you cultivate a lot of wisdom. This is where the third eye is starting to open up a little bit, where the mind is now not just plowing through the world, making haphazard decisions, but you're thinking and pondering, contrasting what it is that you're experiencing in the situation that you're experiencing with the teachings and trying to figure out how should I handle this situation. And then when you make a certain decision, you'll see what is the dhamma coming back to me. What is the result? And this is where the dhamma is the most unbiased teacher, where you can now think and ponder and consider, what am I going to do in this situation? And you might even consult your teacher, and you might even consult other members of the community and say, hey, I've got this situation that's coming up. How do you recommend that I deal with it? And this is part of your thinking and pondering and getting guidance. And as you do this enough, you accumulate more and more wisdom that by the time you get to the second jhana, the thinking and pondering is starting to subside because you've cultivated so much wisdom in this first jhana. So that's what the thinking and pondering is about, is comparing and contrasting your situations and any potential decisions that you're going to make with the teachings. And this is what's helping you to accumulate wisdom in that first jhana. And then it's filled with excitement and joy. This is where people oftentimes experience this ultimate bliss, right? So the excitement is the conditional feelings. The joy is the unconditioned mental quality that you're starting to experience. So these things start happening side by side, and you're having to figure out, is this unconditioned joy that I'm experiencing, or is this conditional excitement that I'm experiencing? And you're going to need to start being able to discern that and figure that out. But you start experiencing this quite extensively in the first jhana. Then the second jhana, which you'll notice when the mind's moving through that, is this thinking and pondering that's probably been going on for a year or two. It starts subsiding, right? So you'll be in that first jhana for a period of time, but it starts to subside because you've now cultivated quite a bit of wisdom in that first jhana through doing all this thinking and pondering, that you're not doing as much thinking and pondering anymore because you have the answer. You just know what you should do. It's like upgrading your operating system. If you have ever upgraded your computer operating system, as you've been doing that, it's kind of cumbersome and it's kind of hard and challenging to figure out where did they move the icons, where did they put this setting or that setting. So in that first jhana, it's kind of cumbersome a little bit because you're doing all this thinking and pondering. But by the time you get into the second jhana, you can more fluidly implement decisions because you've got this base of knowledge, this base of wisdom that you've cultivated. So the thinking and pondering starts to subside a bit because you now have this base of knowledge and wisdom to be able to employ in any given situation. There's going to be this inner tranquility or calmness that comes over the mind. There's going to be this oneness of mind or the unification of mind that I was mentioning earlier. That by the time you get to the second jhana, there's no longer a subconscious mind and a conscious mind. It's now just one mind, and you'll have full awareness of the entire mind. So if you've ever been in a conversation before and you just blurted something out, and you're like, why did I say that? That was so silly. Like, I don't think that way. Why did I say that? That was so offensive. I shouldn't have said that thing. But your mind just kind of blurted it out. That's your subconscious mind, that very dirty, polluted mind sending a thought up into the conscious mind, and you just blurted it out because you didn't have control. You didn't have awareness of the full mind, and you didn't have control of the mind. So you just blurted it out, and then you regretted it later. But by the time you get to the second jhana, you now have full awareness of the entire mind, and those things aren't happening because you're conscious, aware of all the things that are in the mind. There's still pollution in your mind at that point, and you can see all of it. And this is where the mind is like, whoa, you might not have even been aware how much pollution was actually in the mind. It can be pretty dramatic to be able to now see the entire mind, but you won't have those situations where you're just blurting something out unconsciously and then offending someone perhaps or regretting what you said later. So there's this oneness of mind. And then there's this concentration or this singleness of mind that you've been cultivating in meditation, but you've also been practicing it in daily life. You're going to need this concentration because that's what's going to help you apply your wisdom. You wouldn't be able to apply wisdom if you didn't have concentration. So when the mind is uncalm, you don't have mindfulness or awareness of mind. When you don't have awareness of mind, you don't have concentration or focus or clarity. And when you don't have focus or clarity, you can't access your wisdom to be able to make wise decisions to produce wholesome results in the world. So when you're able to maintain your calmness and composure with your tranquility, then you're going to be able to have your mindfulness or awareness of mind. And then you'll have this concentration or this focus. And now you'll be able to access that wisdom that you have developed through your thinking and pondering to now make wiser and wiser decisions about what you're doing in the world and then experience more and more wholesome results. So these are qualities that you need as you're making your way towards enlightenment. And now as you're starting to exit out of the second jhana, the thinking and pondering goes away, where you don't have this obsessive mind constantly thinking and pondering about the teachings because you've cultivated a lot of wisdom in the first jhana and in the second jhana. There's still more wisdom to cultivate in order to get to enlightenment, but the obsessive thinking and pondering has subsided and has been eliminated by the time you're moving out of the second jhana. And then the mind is still filled with excitement and joy. The third jhana, what you'll notice is a fading away of the excitement. Now, remember, we're talking about the conditional excitement, right? You're still having lots of fun. You're still having lots of joy, but it's the conditional excitement that's starting to fade away, meaning based on some condition. My mom is coming to visit me, so therefore I will be excited. But now when she doesn't come and her plans change, you're going to be angry or sad or frustrated. Or you're so excited because you got that new job that you wanted, or you got so excited for this trip that you're about to take and you're getting so excited about it. You're going to notice a fading away of that because you're distanced yourself from the central desires in the first jhana. So you're going to notice this fading away of the conditional excitement, where the mind's not going to be excited because of a particular thing, but you'll notice more and more of this unconditioned joy coming through in the mind. This is where the mind is unable to become upset or excited. So if you think about your mind as being so excited on one side and then sad and frustrated on the other side, by the time you've gotten to this second jhana, that's shrunk a bit, where now you're not getting so excited and you're not getting so sad, that your emotions and your feelings have come more to the middle. You're not completely in the middle yet, but it's moved in closer to the middle. So you're not seeing these extremes anymore by the time your mind's in the second jhana. So that swinging that I was talking about, moving from gladness to sadness, that's starting to subside. You're starting to come more to the middle at this point. And this can feel strange too, because you're used to kind of being in that heightened, maybe excited state. You're used to kind of feeling this low state, where when you're coming into the middle, you can kind of feel a little bit dull, a little bit lethargic, a little bit strange, because you're not used to this feeling. But it's a temporary thing. Your mind will brighten up more and more as you move through the jhanas and into the stages of enlightenment. But as your mind's first starting to kind of move towards the middle, it can feel kind of dull and strange as you're experiencing this. So now, after the mind is in this third jhana and there's this fading away of the excitement, this experiencing of joy is starting to come up. So the conditional excitement is going down, the unconditioned joy is rising up more and more and more. And then there's this peacefulness where the mind is residing with equanimity and mindfulness. Equanimity is calmness and composure, especially in a difficult situation. So that's where I was describing that, say, mom gets in a car accident where you would normally be shaken up by that. Your mind's quite calm. Quite calm. It's like, okay, well, let's handle this. Let's go to the hospital. Let's talk to the doctors and nurses, and let's find out how to get mom some help. You can stay calm and composed. And this might feel a little bit strange to you because you're not used to this, but that's what's starting to arise in the mind. And this mindfulness is the awareness of mind, like we were talking about yesterday. More specifically, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. That's starting to rise up in the mind more and more and more. You've already been practicing mindfulness to get here, but now it's more fully developed. Now the 4th jhana, this is where the mind is completely given up on pleasure and pain, meaning conditional pleasure, right? And conditional pain. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're having fun. You're having way more fun than in the unenlightened state. Because in the unenlightened state, you can only have pleasure when these conditions are met. When these conditions are met, I'll have fun and I'll have excitement. But when those things aren't met, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I'm angry. But by the time you're starting to move through the jhanas and you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment, your mind's going to be able to be happy all the time, be joyful all the time. So by the time you've gotten to the 4th jhana, you've seen that very clearly and you've given up on chasing after pleasurable experiences, where you still do things that are fun, but you're not chasing after them. You're not craving and longing, yearning to do that particular thing where, I just got to see that new movie on opening day when it comes out. I just got to be there. I got to be first in line to see that brand new movie, right? You've let go of that. You're like, well, if I see it today or I see it tomorrow or I see it a month from now, I'll be completely fine. You're not chasing after it. You still enjoy going to see the movie, but you're not chasing it and attaching your emotions and feelings to this particular thing. Okay, so you've given up on this pleasure and pain. There's this fading away of the former gladness and sadness. That's what I'm talking about, where your mind's moving closer to the middle, where your mind's not experiencing these extremes of excitement and sadness anymore, that you're not going to the extremes anymore. Your mind is more come to the middle. And now here the Buddha says, beyond pleasure and pain, meaning the mind has moved beyond this conditional pleasure and pain. You're still experiencing discontentedness in the 4th jhana, but your mind has moved beyond this and you've let go of chasing after that stuff. The mind has developed equanimity, which is this calmness and composure, and mindfulness has been developed to fulfillment, meaning your mind has equanimity fully developed and then mindfulness is fully developed. You will fully have developed the 4 foundations of mindfulness by the time you've in the 4th jhana, that you'll have awareness of the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness arising. You'll have awareness of the feelings. You'll have awareness of the condition of the mind and the mental objects. This is what you're experiencing, that those qualities have been brought to full development and full perfection, equanimity and mindfulness. Okay? So as I've mentioned many times, is the jhanas are indication that the mind is moving in the right direction. This is like the light bulb flickering. So any questions on any one of the individual jhanas? And then for those of you guys online, if you would like to ask questions, you can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
David, I'm actually curious about, is pondering the same as curiosity?
Curiosity to me is an interest to know. Mm-hmm. That's the way I think about the word curiosity. Pondering is like, I've got this access to this wisdom and I would like to figure out what would be the best thing to do here. Where curiosity is like, hey, I'm generally interested in space and aeronautics. Okay. I'm curious about space. And when I learn about the planets and the stars and stuff, I'm curious about those things. But pondering is like, what should I do in this situation? I've got this situation that's happening. I need to make the best decision here, and let me think and figure out what would be best here. So to me, those are two different things.
So it's a little deeper, maybe starts with curiosity, but goes deeper.
Yeah, it's really trying to figure out what would be the wisest and best thing to do in this situation, because you're interested in producing the best results. Because by the time you get to the jhanas, you understand the natural law of karma, and you understand that anything you put out is coming back to you. And the last thing you're interested in is making an unwise decision, even though you will still make some unwise decisions through here, but you're very interested in not making those unwise decisions. So you really think and ponder what would be best.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question about resignation, like it seems like with the jhanas, there could be this place where you get quite resigned to things. And that seems, is that one of the dangers?
Yeah.
But it also seems like it's kind of necessary. So now I'm sort of with that.
Yeah, the mind experiences such improved qualities that it can kind of get bogged down in those because it feels so great. And it's like night and day from what you've experienced before, but you're still experiencing discontentedness in these jhanas. Right. So you can use that as motivation to get out and keep on moving forward. But the qualities are so improved. It's like, wow, this is great. Right. I just want to sit here and enjoy this. And that's where the mind can become complacent. But you would like to continue to stay dedicated and diligent so you can move through them, because there's more qualities even better than the jhanas waiting for you down the path further, but you'll never get to them if you get bogged down in them. So the mind is residing in these qualities, but it's important not to cling to them and get bogged down in them and allow the mind to dwell there, but instead just keep moving forward.
Yeah, I love that as a motivation, actually. Yeah. That's really...
It's kind of like if you're on a trail where you're hiking on a mountain and you see this beautiful view when you're kind of like halfway up the mountain. If you just stay there and keep looking at that view, you're never going to get to the top and see the beautiful view at the summit. Right? Yeah. There's a much more beautiful view waiting for you up there. But if you just cling to this little view right here, this beautiful landscape, you're not going to be able to see the one on top.
Yeah, that's really lovely. I've never really kind of considered that as a motivation, more of kind of a, not a negative, but kind of that stuck feeling. Yes. But the idea of using that to be motivated actually really helps. So thank you. Yeah,
for sure. Okay. Steve.
Firstly, thank you for that talk. That was just wonderful this morning to hear all that. When you showed the words of the Buddha describing this, did I understand it correctly that it might well be that as one is going through the first jhana, that it might be associated with a period of seclusion?
Yeah, so as you're moving through the path to enlightenment, you're going to need to go through periods of time where you're comfortable being alone. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they would go out in the forest and they would spend multiple weeks and months alone in the forest. They would come out and get food each day, but then they would retreat to the forest. So today, retreating to the forest is unlikely for most people, but you're going to need to get used to being alone. So where like I grew up, people thought that if you went to the mall alone, you were a loser, right? And like, we would think like, don't go to the mall alone. You got to take a bunch of friends with you because you can't be seen in the mall by yourself because people think you're a loser. Or like when I went to college, if you went to the dining hall alone and you didn't have friends to eat with, people thought you were a loser, right? So you're going to need to get comfortable with being alone. So nowadays it might mean you go to the movies by yourself. Or you might go to vacation by yourself, or you might go to the mall by yourself, or you might go on holiday by yourself, or go to the park by yourself, where you enjoy spending time alone. Because as you become more and more enlightened, you're going to have quite a bit of time where you're alone, and you need to feel comfortable with that. You need to be comfortable being alone with your own thoughts, where sometimes we try to fill up our day with being around other people because we're not comfortable with our own thoughts. By the time your mind is in these jhanas, you're starting to have lots of thoughts because you're having this full awareness of the entire mind. There's no longer the conscious and subconscious mind. So you're going to need to feel comfortable being alone. So the Buddha describes it as seclusion because they would go into the forest alone. But today that might mean doing some of the things that I just talked about, where you go to the movies alone, you go on holiday alone, you do these kinds of things where you're comfortable spending time alone. And you also are comfortable spending time with other people too. So that's how you can think about that seclusion, is that you're comfortable being alone and you're comfortable within your own skin. Yep. Kushi, did you have a question? I thought I saw you grab a mic.
Yeah, I have a question. So after going through this for jhanas, a person gets to the first stage of enlightenment. Is it so?
Yes. Once you move out of the fourth jhana, the mind will move into the first stage of enlightenment. If it's not regressed, right? If you keep dedicated and diligent, you'll move into the first stage of enlightenment.
Okay, and till what the mind goes to that it doesn't regress back? Is it second stage of enlightenment?
Once you're in the first stage of enlightenment, the mind won't regress backwards from that point. But as long as you're in the jhanas, there's the potential that the mind can regress if you become complacent. But if you just stay diligent and continue to focus as I'm teaching you, then you'll move into the first stage of enlightenment and your mind won't regress from that point forward.
So after the fourth jhana, there is still a few things to do to reach to first stage of enlightenment.
Yes. And while you're in the jhanas, you're doing those things in order to get to the first stage.
Okay, and I don't understand that in fourth jhana, if a person is giving up pleasure and pain, all the conditioned pleasure and pain, then why would they be interested in having sexual relationship?
You're giving it up, meaning in terms of your mind understands that it's unwise to do these things. You haven't completely eliminated the pleasure and pain out of your life in terms of conditional pleasure and pain, but you've kind of given up and you realize like, this is pointless. Why would I keep doing this? The mind still is doing it, but the mind is intellectually given up on it.
Okay, and
by the way, the reason why it keeps doing it is because there's still sensual desire in the mind. You still have that fetter. It's not until you get to the third stage of enlightenment that the sensual desire is 100% eliminated.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's see if we have anything online. All right, I'm not seeing anything online, so I've got more for you guys here. We're not done yet. This was just helping you to understand what the jhanas are. Okay, so now I'm going to use the words of the Buddha to help you understand certain aspects of the jhanas that he talked about. And I've got a lot of different excerpts that I've extracted here to help you be able to understand what the Buddha is teaching. And you guys can read these. I'm not going to read all of them. I'm just going to explain to you what he's talking about. So this first one, he's talking about when you enter into the jhanas, you've blindfolded Mara. Mara is this formless being that is interested in causing calamity and unwholesome things in the world. We might refer to this in other traditions as like the devil or Satan. This is a real being. This being is trying to influence you and others to do unwise and unwholesome things. It's your wisdom that's going to allow you to not pay attention to Mara and be uninfluenced by Mara. But if you've ever been standing like on a third story of a mall looking over the side and you heard somebody say, jump, jump, like in your mind, like jump, jump, or punch that girl. Did you hear what she said? Punch her, right? This little voice in the mind that's trying to influence you to do unwise things. And it's your wisdom that's going to determine what you choose to do or not do. So Mara can't force you to do anything, but Mara can be there to try to convince you to do these unwise things. So by the time you've gotten to the jhanas, you've cultivated enough wisdom and enough control over your mind that you've blindfolded Mara. Mara will no longer try to influence you any longer. That Mara understands, because this being is fairly wise, that it understands that you've got a certain amount of wisdom, you've got a certain amount of inner control, inner discipline of the mind, and Mara doesn't try to influence you anymore. But that voice is going to continue to be there in the mind, trying to convince you to do unwise things. But it's your decisions that are going to lead to any particular unwholesome results. So getting into the jhanas is really helpful because you won't have that being continuing to try to influence you in unwise and unwholesome ways. The Buddha is sharing here that you're secure from danger. And this is also related to Mara, that Mara can't do anything to you. It's not possible for Mara to influence you by the time you've gotten into the jhanas because you have too much wisdom. Where when you're not in the jhanas, Mara could maybe, say something and you might punch that girl, right? And you might do something unwise. But by the time you've gotten into the jhanas, you have enough wisdom and enough inner discipline that Mara isn't able to influence you, and you're secure from this danger. Also here you can see where the Buddha talks about this higher mind, where he says, if a monk should aspire, may I become one to obtain at will, without trouble or difficulty, the 4 jhanas that constitute the higher mind and provide a peaceful residing here and now, let him fulfill the precepts. Right? So this is why you can understand that you need to practice the 5 precepts to get to the jhanas. It's not just meditation that's going to get you to the jhanas. You need to be having enough wisdom to practice the things like the 5 precepts. So that's why in all the foundational programs I teach you the 5 precepts using the original words of the Buddha. If you've learned no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, you haven't learned the 5 precepts in the way that you need to apply them, because that sounds like black and white. It sounds like a bunch of rules and commandments, and you're not going to have enough wisdom to apply the 5 precepts in all given situations. So you need to explore those using the words of the Buddha through the resources that I share, and then you'll be able to practice them to be able to get to this higher mind, which is what the Buddha is describing the jhanas as, this higher mind, this higher consciousness. The jhanas leads towards enlightenment. Here you can see the Buddha says, monks, just as the river Ganges slants, slopes, and inclines towards the east, so too a monk who develops and cultivates the 4 jhanas slants, slopes, and inclines towards nibbana, or enlightenment. This is the qualities of the jhanas are accumulating and helping you get to enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without the jhanas. The jhanas are preliminary phases that you're experiencing as the mind's moving towards enlightenment. So just like a river slants and slopes to a certain direction, if you get into the jhanas, it slants and slopes towards enlightenment. You're very likely to make your way to enlightenment if your mind's experiencing the jhanas, but you can also get complacent too. So that's why you need to be aware of that. But those qualities that you're experiencing in the jhanas is what's going to help you to be able to get to enlightenment. That's why he's saying it slants, slopes, and inclines towards enlightenment. Here, the next one is there's this improved rebirth, that if you happen to die when you're in the jhanas, there is an improved rebirth. Obviously, your interest isn't to die when you're in the jhanas. Your interest is to get all the way to enlightenment and die there. But if for some reason you die when you're in the jhanas, there is an improved rebirth. And perhaps you got to the jhanas in a previous life, and now here you are studying the teachings of the Buddha again. You might have actually died in the jhanas in a previous life, and now you've made your way back to the teachings. So if you die in the jhanas, there is an improved rebirth where you have more ability to be able to get access to the teachings in your next life. Then the Buddha describes the jhanas as an inconceivable matter. He describes multiple things as an inconceivable matter. He talks about trying to conceive the experiences of a Buddha and what a Buddha experiences in terms of how they get to enlightenment. He says this is an inconceivable matter, that you shouldn't try to speculate about what a Buddha experiences because it would lead to madness or frustration. He talks about you shouldn't try to speculate about the exact cause cause and condition of what leads to any particular karma. So like you should understand the natural law of karma, but the exact cause and effect of why did I just step on a nail? What was the exact cause or effect, or why did that person do this, that, or the other thing? You can generally see these things through the natural law of karma, but to understand the exact thing, he says, if you tried to conceive this, it would lead to madness or frustration. He also talks about speculating about the world, like conspiracy theories. If you tried to have conspiracy theories and you speculated about the world, you didn't really know the truth, you were just speculating about it. He said it would lead to madness or frustration. And people who are into conspiracy theories, you can see they have quite a bit of madness and frustration. And then he also talks about the jhanas. And he says to speculate about the jhanas and try to truly understand 100% of what you will experience when you're in the jhanas. If you tried to do this without actually being in the jhanas, it would lead to madness or frustration. So essentially, you can't understand what chocolate ice cream tastes like until you actually taste chocolate ice cream. I could sit here and describe chocolate ice cream to you all day long, but if you tried to wrap your mind around understanding chocolate ice cream without having ever tasted it, it would lead to madness and frustration because you have no idea what chocolate ice cream tastes like. So while we talk about the jhanas and I help you to understand them, you'll actually fully understand them when you're actually experiencing them. So while I help you to understand these and give you some kind of data points to think about so that you'll know and have indication when your mind's moving through the jhanas, you don't need to spend an obsessive amount of time trying to figure out what the jhanas are and where you're at in the jhanas, because it's going to lead to madness or frustration. That's what I was talking about earlier, that you shouldn't obsess about the jhanas. Sometimes people get very obsessive about the jhanas. In the Buddha sharing with you, it would lead to madness or frustration if you tried to do this. Some more words of the Buddha about the jhanas, that he talks about the abandonment of the 5 hindrances in order to get into the jhanas. We're going to be talking about the 5 hindrances in this course. I have a class where I've dedicated to helping you understand the 5 hindrances. This is sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry, and doubt. You haven't completely eliminated these things by the time your mind is in the jhanas, but you've abandoned them, meaning you've distanced yourself from them. So we're going to talk about what those are. Then meditation leads towards the jhanas. The Buddha does talk about meditation in relationship to the jhanas, that you need meditation in order to get to the jhanas. But oftentimes people haven't really fully explored all the teachings of the Buddha. They might have only seen that particular teaching. And this is why people are misled to oftentimes think that it's only meditation that is going to lead to the jhanas. As you can see with the words of the Buddha, you need much more than meditation to be able to get to the jhanas. But if someone's only ever seen this particular teaching about meditation in the jhanas, they could potentially think that all you need is meditation to get to the jhanas. But here you can see that he's saying that if you meditate using breathing mindfulness meditation, that you will not be lacking the qualities of the jhanas. So it's meditation that is going to lead you towards the jhanas, but you need other things besides the meditations as well. So here you can see the Buddha talking about that. Also, in order to get to the jhanas, you need to eliminate selfishness. You're going to need a practice of generosity. And this is why I teach it in all the foundational programs, that you're going to need to be able to give and share without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. And the Buddha gets very specific with this. He talks about selfishness in regards to dwellings, meaning like where you live. Right? Like if you were selfish, like you didn't want people staying in your house and you were clinging to your house, when a guest comes over, you don't like for them to stay there. You don't offer your place for people to stay. This is selfishness in regards to dwellings, because it's mine, my house. I don't want anybody else here. Selfishness in regards to families. This is practicing generosity with your family. You're going to need to be able to practice that within your family, your parents, your siblings, your life partner, your children. You need to practice giving and sharing. Selfishness in regards to material possessions. This is like maybe your jewelry, your clothes, your shoes, maybe your computer, your phone, things like this, that you'd be willing to share these things in order to be able to get into the jhanas, because that's the mind letting go to a certain degree. Selfishness in regards to praise. What this is like you're willing to compliment other people about things that they're doing well. You're not interested in being overly complimentary because this can arise somebody's ego. Of course, they're the ones who are allowing that to happen. But if you just lay it on with a lot of praise, people's egos will arise. And then this is going to be problematic for you because you'll be around all these people that are having all kinds of ego. So you would like to not be selfish with your praise. Point things out when people are doing things wisely, or you have employees, you have friends, you have family. You might praise them in a certain way, but don't lay it on real thick because this can arise the ego, and now you have an ego to deal with. And then selfishness in regards to the teachings. What this means is that by the time you get to the jhanas, if somebody says, hey, by the way, what are those 5 precepts that the Buddha taught? You'd be willing to say, oh, those 5 precepts, they're right here in this book. Would you like to use this? Or, hey, I've got this video that I watched. Would you like this? Right? You'd be willing to share the teachings with other people, that you wouldn't be selfish. Because by the time you get into the jhanas, you've seen such improvement to the condition of the mind, and you know that it's these teachings that are leading you closer and closer to enlightenment, that you'd be willing to share the teachings with other people when asked, or people are interested in the teachings. You don't need to go out and proactively try to convince people to learn the teachings, but when people ask you and when people are interested, you'd be willing to share. Maybe if you're in a situation where maybe your child got injured and your friends are like, wow, you are so calm. How do you do that? Oh, it's the teachings of the Buddha. Oh, really? What part of the teachings of the Buddha helped you to become so calm? Oh, it's this meditation and this equanimity and this mindfulness. Oh, can you share something with me? I'd like to learn that. You'd be like, sure, here you go. You can share this. Here's a book, or here's a link that can help you. So you'd be willing to share the teachings in those situations. Okay, so this is some words of the Buddha around the jhanas. Here's some more words where he's talking. This is titled, without having abandoned selfishness, one is incapable of realizing the fruit of arahantship. So not only is generosity important to get into the jhanas, but it's continually important in order to get into enlightenment too. Arahantship is how the Buddha would describe enlightenment. That's the 4th stage of enlightenment. So those same things that I was just talking about, that you need to abandon selfishness of dwellings, of families, of material possessions, of praise, and of the teachings. Not only do you need to do that in order to get into the jhanas, but you need to continue to do that in order to make your way through the 4 stages of enlightenment and actually get to enlightenment itself. So these are the words of the Buddha that he's explaining that for you. Okay, and I have this in all the book series and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so just to kind of like summarize this and bring this to a close before we take our break, as your mind is moving into these jhanas and you're starting to experience the jhanas, this is the time to start focusing on the 10 fetters really closely. And that's why the rest of today, we're going to be focusing on the 4 stages of enlightenment and the fetters, because it's the Eightfold Path, what I taught yesterday, which is leading to the jhanas. And now when you start getting indication that your mind's in the jhanas, you would like to start focusing on the 10 fetters. This is what's going to help you to move into the 1st stage of enlightenment and beyond, actually, to enlightenment itself. So you would like to continue to maintain your life practice with the Eightfold Path, all the things that you've been doing in order to get to the jhanas. You would like to maintain that and even dial that Eightfold Path in even closer. But now you start more specifically focusing on the 10 fetters. You've been working on eliminating the 10 fetters all the way through as you were developing the Eightfold Path, even with the meditations. But now you're more consciously focusing on each individual fetter. And that's why we're going to spend time talking about it this afternoon. So ensure you continue to work towards elimination of complacency and conceit, because in the jhanas, those are 2 unwholesome qualities that can easily arise. If you're noticing complacency, if you're noticing conceit come into the mind, you need to be vigilant of that and stay attentive to that and work on eliminating those things. Keep in mind that when you're experiencing the jhanas, as pleasurable as that is, you aren't done yet. This is where the real work kind of just begins, is when you get into the jhanas. So you haven't yet fully eliminated the 10 fetters, but it's an indication for you, wow, these teachings are true. This is where it gets real. I mean, you can see through the Four Noble Truths, like, yeah, it's craving, desire, attachment that causes discontentedness. You can see the 5 precepts, like, yeah, it's unwise for me to do these things. And you can confirm some of the teachings. But when you start experiencing these heightened qualities and you see that the Buddha described these jhanas 2,500 years ago in those words that I just shared with you, and you're experiencing those exact things that he talked about 2,500 years ago, you'll be confirmed like, oh my goodness, this person actually lived and he really taught, because what he said 2,500 years ago, I'm experiencing exactly that. It gets real quick. So this is where the mind can get really excited and be really enthused with what's going on, and everything that you've been learning and growing and developing has led exactly where he said it would lead. But remember, you're not done yet. This is where the real work begins. So don't get bogged down in those enjoyable qualities of the jhanas. Okay? So any questions there? Rachel, go ahead, ma'am. Well, let me just share this and then I'll let you ask your question, Rachel. Is I've shared this all the way through, is the jhanas is the light bulb flickering. Don't let it go out, right? Just keep staying attentive to what it is that you're doing. The light bulb's flickering. Don't let it go out. It will flicker for a while, but don't let it go out. Stay dedicated and focused and diligent in your practice, continuing to do what got you to the jhanas, which is the Eightfold Path. And then ultimately what I'm going to do here at the end, as I open up to questions, you first, Rachel, is if there's any questions that you have about the Eightfold Path, I would like you to be able to ask any and all questions about the Eightfold Path, because this is what you need to dial in really closely in order to get to the jhanas. Okay, so go ahead, Rachel. What's your question, ma'am?
Regarding selfishness, I recall a story many years ago. A friend of mine, he asked if it is possible for one of his female friends to stay in my apartment, maybe because there was some inconvenience for the girl at that time. But because I didn't have an extra room for her at that moment, and also it was quite I don't think it's quite comfortable for me to share a room with a girl who I didn't know well, and we need to share a room or even share a bed. So I rejected my friend. I'm thinking, because you just mentioned selfishness about sharing the room or sharing something with people, so the story popped up. My question is, if you were in that situation, what would you do?
Yeah, so if I was in that situation, what I would say is, hey, if you'd like to stay here, you can, but all I have available is this, right? Because it sounds like you felt like you couldn't quite accommodate this person and you didn't have a level of accommodation that you saw suitable, but that was a decision that you were making within your own mind. Instead, I would have said, hey, what I have available is this. And while it's not really that much, you're welcome to use this if you'd like. And then that way, that person gets to decide whether that was suitable for them or not. And you're still living open-handedly, and you're still practicing generosity in that situation.
I didn't recall exactly, but I think the girl would be hey if she comes to stay with me and even share the room, share the bed with me. But for me, it's uncomfortable to share a bed or share a room with somebody who I'm not very close to. I think for her, she doesn't have the problem, but for me, there is a problem.
Yeah, and that's what the mind needs to let go of. There's a craving in there that's making you feel like that's uncomfortable. That uncomfortableness is the discontentedness that the mind's experiencing. So you need to get to the point where you let go of your craving so that the mind is no longer uncomfortable in that situation.
And then how about how to make a balance between taking care of myself and taking care of others?
You're not responsible to take care of others. Everybody's responsible for their own welfare, unless we're taking care of children or something like this, right? You're not obligated to do any particular thing for any particular person. But what the Buddha is teaching you is that in order to get rid of your craving, desire, attachment, and experience these improved qualities of mind, you're going to need to eliminate any craving or clinging or holding on, in this example of your dwelling in your home, and be willing to give and share your home. But this isn't an obligation or a requirement. This is training your mind to let go of craving, desire, attachment. It's not a rule. It's not a commandment. It's a practice in order to train your mind to eliminate craving and attachment.
But so far, I think if the same situation happens again, I will still say no, but of course in a gentle way and provide some explanation, because it's difficult for me to do so now.
Yeah, and that's the reason why the mind needs to practice. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is there for you to train your mind to let go. And then you have all these other ways of practicing generosity that maybe the mind right now at this particular point isn't ready to share your dwelling, but you can do these lighter types of generosity to kind of soften up the mind and get more and more comfortable with these kinds of things. Where if you're doing breathing mindfulness meditation and practicing generosity in other places, it'll get easier for you to share this particular thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can share with you. I think I shared this with somebody just recently. When I had my son, firstborn, obviously it was a planned pregnancy. We knew she was pregnant for 9 months. When he first came home from the hospital, you ever have a guest over and you're like, you just can't wait for them to leave? It's like, man, it's fun having them here, but man, if they would just leave, it'd be great. I kind of don't want them here anymore. That's the craving that the Buddha is helping you to eliminate. Well, even my son, my brand new newborn son, it was like he was there for like a week or two. And he was brand new, newborn. I was just like, man, when is this kid going to leave? Like, man, like I'm kind of like want my private time again. Like he's always around. And I had to tell myself, I was like, hold on a second. He's going to be here for a while. It's going to be 18 years and he's going to be at least 18 years and he's going to be here. So my mind had to let go. Even my own son, that was a planned pregnancy. There was a bit of craving there in the mind, not wanting him to be there, not wanting to share this dwelling. So my mind had to let that go. So it's understandable, Rachel, that people that aren't even related to you, your mind's having trouble to share your dwelling, because in this situation, I wasn't even ready to share 100% with my own son. It took me 2 weeks to train my mind to let that go, right? So you're going to need to train your mind to let this go. And then that's where you can be peaceful. And it was almost like this calmness came over the mind when I finally let go. And I was like, you know what? He's going to be here for a while. You better get used to it. And my mind just got calm in that instant, right? So you're going to need to do that kind of thing too. Get rid of your craving and attachment to your dwelling. And this was where the more comfort and the more peace and joy will come into your mind. Yes, sir.
I have heard people say all possible things about the states of being in a jhana, like seeing all possible colors, or not even being able to hear things, or to have sensual perceptions and all that. None of that you mentioned today. What about these, how can I say, supernatural occurrences?
Yeah, I don't mention those things because those aren't the qualities that are going to help you to get to enlightenment, but these things do occur. The colors that a person is seeing, and I talk about this when I teach meditation, what it is it's the structure of the brain changing. It's not anything mystical or magical. The colors that you're seeing there, that's because you've been training the mind, and the mind is separate from the brain. These are two separate things. The brain is what's involved in sight. Even though we have an eye, it's just taking in light. The actual sight is actually occurring inside the brain. So when you're training the mind and you're purifying the mind, there's an effect to the brain, and the physical structures of the brain are changing. So you can see these different colors, but this is just kind of a byproduct of having purified the mind. So when those things are happening, just know that they're impermanent and kind of move on. As your mind is awakening more and more, you can easily experience recall of past lives. This is possible, where you have observation of past lives. You can experience communication with beings in other realms, hell beings. Of course, you're around animals all the time, afflicted spirits, heavenly beings. Even before you get into the jhanas, some people can experience communication with these other beings. So this is possible in the jhanas, but even before the jhanas as well. You can even sometimes see these beings as well. I talk about this in other classes, but I don't necessarily directly talk about it in relationship to the jhanas, because it's not just the jhanas where these things are experienced. Sometimes you can see these colors and you can see these beings and have communication with these beings even when you're outside the jhanas, when you're not even in the jhanas yet. But these things are all possibilities of things that occur. So that's why I talk about them in other classes and other programs that I teach, because they're not specifically for the jhanas themselves. They can happen even before the jhanas. But these things that I'm talking about here, this is happening inside the jhanas and directly associated with the jhanas itself.
And whenever you don't experience these things, does it also mean you are not in jhana?
Not necessarily. Not everybody's going to have the exact same experience of seeing colors and communication with beings and observing past lives and things like this and being able to see beings. Not everybody's going to experience those same things, but these things everybody's going to experience in their movement on their way to the first stage of enlightenment and through the jhanas. But these other things are possibilities, but not everybody will experience them. So they're not needed in order to get to enlightenment. That's why we typically teach, what do you need in order to get to enlightenment? So Yusef, you have a question? Go ahead, sir.
Hi, good morning. Is it okay to ask a question not related to the Eightfold Path or the jhanas, a general one?
If we could talk about that offline, Yusef, because we're needing to go take a break, and I would rather talk about it then if it's possible, since it's not related to this topic.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. Okay,
sounds good. All right, let's see. What do we have here? We have something coming in on YouTube. Oh, that's from you too, Yusef. All right, let's see. I don't see anything else. So what we'll do then is just kind of wrap this up by thanking you guys for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn. As you can see, it gets really interesting as your mind starts experiencing these improved qualities, these phases that the mind moves through. Nothing to get excited about, but it is something to be enthused about and motivated and encouraged to work towards. And as you're experiencing any of these things, you're always welcome to reach out and get help, because even when your mind's in the jhanas, even when you're in the first, second, third stage of enlightenment, you're still going to need guidance from your teacher, right? You're still going to need help. So feel free to reach out as you're experiencing any of these things, and enjoy your break. It's 11:15. Let's come back at 11:30 and we'll pick it up there talking about the 4 stages of enlightenment. Okay, so thank you guys for your questions.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.